the pattern that we're going through with muscle cars right now, and what you're going to see is very similar to what you're seeing with the early 90s street rod, hot rod craze. And what I mean by that is back in the 90s and in the late 80s, Boyd and a lot of the earlier guys, they were doing very wild, extensive street rods. Really wild, like a perfect example. Crazy car. And you have to go wild in the beginning when you create a new scene, because you have to embrace new technology. In this case, it was machining, billet. And then once we get the technology down and time goes on, I think you can take that technology and put it to a little bit more subtle, tasteful.
Pull back and refine.
Yeah, now we can pull back and refine, and that's why now you're seeing a lot of the Troy Ladd cars and a little bit more tasteful retro car. Not to say that these weren't tasteful, but I think it's like you go wild first, and then as time goes on, we taper it and narrow it down to something really tasteful. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing in muscle cars.
Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith. This is my car buddy Cam Benty and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories.
I'm ready. That's it. Me stuff. So welcome to yet another episode of Car Guy Confessions with Jeff Smith, who isn't here.
He isn't here.
He's basking in the snow. That's
what he's frozen food.
That's what he's basking in right about now. So anyway, today, well, first we have to thank the important people, which in this case would be ARP, ARP-bolts.com.
Correct.
And of course, you can see, the glorious Aluma Coupe behind us. We are at the Petersen Automotive Museum on Wilshire Boulevard in LA. If you haven't been here, get here.
Yep.
If you're into this stuff, because you must be, or you're crazy because you're listening to us, you need to come here. It's extremely impressive, and it's gotten really good. I get all those fancy European car magazines, and even they brag that this is, if it's not the number one, it's within the top automotive museums in the world. It's a fantastic place.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic place. But even more importantly, joining us is Sean Smith, hot rod muscle car designer extraordinaire. There he is, right there. Right? Boom, on your screen. Sean. Thank you for dropping in.
Thank you for having me.
And
It's
coming
the official
in.
P on his shirt, so we're good.
Wow.
He's been approved.
That's
new
pretty
and approved.
fancy.
It's got like
I don't have
it's
that.
got like a trademark, you know.
Really?
That's right.
Is that
like
his?
good housekeeping.
Yeah. Is that his?
No.
Oh.
Comes when you walk in the door.
Oddly enough, I
That's
don't
it.
have one.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll get you one.
Oh, thanks. Cool.
That's right.
So, so it is, what is it? It's December. We're in the middle of December.
Yes.
So that means we had just passed our yearly mecca of insanity, which is known as SEMA.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Right. Yep.
And you, unbeknownst to you, and I didn't know the GTO you brought.
Yes.
I didn't know it was yours when I first saw it. Nobody said,
Well, I
oh,
don't-
that's Sean Smith's design.
This is
or,
the
you know.
67? We're talking
Yeah. Yes.
67?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All right.
I had no idea. I'm walking around on setup day, Sunday and Monday, and I see this thing sitting there.
Yeah.
And as we all know, SEMA has the grandest of the grand, just the most crazy over-the-top things you can see. And then every now and then, you have something with a shit ton of taste. And that for me this year, and it's not because he's sitting here, that was his car. The GTO had the right amount of wow to it.
Yep.
Won an award for the interior, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
was one of my favorite parts of the car. So I enjoyed looking at it. I came back to look at it again.
Right.
And I came back to see, because I love learning why I like it when I see a car, right? Because I kind of design things from time to time. And so when I see something that sparks my interest and I want to look at it, after I'm done going, wow, that's so bitchin', I'm like, so what are the things that are drawing me to this car? Because I've seen a ton of them. You know, it's certainly not the first GTO I've seen, let alone there's one going together in my shop right now, so I'm GTO'd to here.
Yeah.
So I went back and found many really tasteful little alterations that I nickname on my cars the Easter egg hunt.
Right.
Sure.
Some you can see, well, that clearly didn't come stock. But there's some other stuff that you can go, ooh, that's a nice little thing. Or other stuff that's not stock. But I think what I like the most about, especially on the interior and other stuff, is there were many things that were clearly not stock. They were changed and altered. but they were brought in a very tasteful way where it still made sense in the car. For me, I see a lot of crazy over-the-top pro touring stuff, and it's meant to be crazy over the top.
right.
But for me, sometimes it leaves like, what in the world did you do that for? You know,
Sure.
whatever
Fall short of the mark,
Or,
you're saying.
or it's just
Overdone.
crazy to be crazy, and it blows away the car.
Right.
So I really like the restraint. I think that's my favorite word for your GTO is, even though there was everything over the top and tons of handmade stuff, it was still a lot of restraint that it made sense together. It was a really easy to look at car that nothing went, oh my God.
Right.
So many kudos to you that it was literally it was in my top 2, maybe 3 favorite cars that were there. I really enjoyed looking at it.
Yeah.
So what was the inspiration for that car? How did that car come to be? I mean, what was the situation?
It's
What was
kind of
the initial-
multi-stage, right? You had,
Was it an owner that came to you and said, "I want this," and you designed things and you went through all the different levels? Or
Right.
what
Me
was
and the owner
background?
had Steve Aguilar had done a car before that car called Infrared Camaro.
Okay. Sure.
And
sure.
that was a 71 Z28.
Yep.
And he always had the GTO in the background that he wanted to do something with it. We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do with it, but he wanted to do something. And we wanted to always do something along the lines that was a little bit more restraint exercised when we came to it. So when the time came to kind of look at it, at first we wanted just to make a really nice driver, everyday driver. So the car ended up over at Roadster Shop first. And that's when we had the chassis and the engine and drivetrain installed, and it was going to be part of their Survivor Series. The car got kind of, COVID came and they went through a shutdown in Illinois and everything, and,
Sure.
and they did a really good job, and they did some of the initial metal fabrication on the engine bay and a lot of the car. But we brought the car back until we didn't know really where things were headed during that time. We didn't know if car shows were going to even come back for a while, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And so
It was a pretty scary time. you know?
yeah, so Steve brought the car back, and we kind of sat on things, and he had me do a series of drawings. And as we know with these projects, they have a tendency to end up snowballing and going extensive, which is what the route it ended up being. For I think one of the things that we stayed true to is we wanted to really embrace what the GTO was. We didn't want to get carried away, and like you said, there's a lot of crazy, extensively wild-built pro touring cars right now, and a lot of what I've been a part of too. But I think for this car, we wanted to embrace what a GTO was. So I think in the back of my mind, I was starting to set a story for the car. I know you do this as well.
Yeah,
That's how you work.
definitely.
And oftentimes I do this with cars. And I don't have to tell the story to everybody. Not everybody has to get the story, but I have to tell a story to myself in my head of what I'm doing. And this kind of provides a narrative of a concept and a direction of the car when I draw.
Is the story? I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I find also when I have a story or whatever we want to call it, it corrals the ideas.
Right.
If you're having a theme or a story, then all these parts got to fit that.
Exactly.
You can't go get apart from that kind of a theme because it won't
It doesn't fit. Right.
Right.
It
So
doesn't fit the script that you've kind of put together.
Sure. Yep.
Right.
Sure. Definitely.
And
So my question is, when you say the story, are you talking about 67 GTO's story, or are you talking about this car's story was?
No, it's just a story
founded
that I make.
here?
And
Yeah.
a lot of times that's the fun part of being a designer is you can come up with a story that doesn't really have to be true.
So it's a fictionalized
Yeah.
idea of where this particular piece of steel came from.
Right. So
Okay.
in my mind is if John DeLorean, who we all know is a man of excess, and likes nice things and a lot of it, if he had unlimited budget and unlimited GM, if they were to do the Bentley of the GTO, what would that be?
Sure.
If it was the cater to the top brass executive type car in Detroit, the car that you wanted to park out front the golf course off of Lake Michigan, what would that car be? And so that was kind of the inspiration behind the car, is using premium materials and absolute luxury performance GT back in the late 60s. I love that period of time in America, late 60s and early 70s for design period, like mid-century modern, and architecture was really good, and the way people dressed was really nice, and the cars were really amazing too. So for me, this was a different car because this was the first car that I was able to exercise restraint. I will be the first to admit that I don't always do that. I always tend to go pretty far out with my designs and use pretty innovative materials, and I'm responsible for a lot of cars that are being all carbon fiber and a lot of billet and machining and a lot of 3D design processes. But this was the first car where I feel like I was like trying to go a little bit more retro inspired and embrace what the GTO was. Yeah. It's funny, I tend to think that the pattern, I think you'll agree with this too, Steve, is the pattern that we're going through with muscle cars right now, and what you're going to see is very similar to what you're seeing with the early 90s street rod, hot rod craze. And what I mean by that is back in the 90s and in the late 80s, Boyd and a lot of the earlier guys, they were doing very wild, extensive street rods. Really wild, like a perfect example. Crazy car. And you have to go wild in the beginning when you create a new scene, because you have to embrace new technology. In this case, it was machining, billet. That was
rear engine, a Mitsubishi motor.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that weren't done.
Very different. Yeah.
And then once we get the technology down and time goes on, I think you can take that technology and put it to a little bit more subtle, tasteful.
Pull back and refine.
Yeah, now we can pull back and refine, and that's why now you're seeing a lot of the Troy Ladd cars and a little bit more tasteful retro cars. Not to say that these weren't tasteful, but I think it's like you go wild first, and then as time goes on, we taper it and narrow it down to something really tasteful. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing in muscle cars.
So we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP and ARP-bolts.com. And we all three build cars. We all work on this stuff. And
I tinker.
You tinker.
I tinker.
Yes, we all build.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of a really cool multiple purpose fastener for me, because there's all the science and all the technology, which is bottomless. Trust me. Unbelievable amount of research that they put into these things.
Absolutely.
And on top of it, you get them out of the package, and they're absolutely beautiful, which I've joked before. It's like jewelry for your car. And when we're building when we're building a high-end car, there isn't anything else going on it. It's part of the criteria for me to have them lining the engine bay, not just on the engine, everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
So you get all the strength, the durability, the reliability, and fantastic good looks.
Sure.
Kind of like Jeff here.
And without peer. Without peer.
And you know what?
Or pairs.
Without peer, there's nobody else that does what they do.
It is. So check them out at arp-bolts.com, and they can help you out.
I think in the beginning of pro touring, you had the crazy carbon fiber, the crazy everything, and you still see that. But now as time goes on, how can we take that? Like Singer. Singer does all these things, but you don't know it because most of the body's carbon.
Yes.
It's machined nickel. There's a lot of nickel and stuff like. But it's done in a way that you just don't know it, and I think it's done.
And I really like that.
Exactly.
And it looks great 20 years from now.
Exactly. So I think you need the innovation, you need the wild in the beginning, but it's like when a new band comes out. The first album's the craziest, but as time goes on, they have a tendency to change themselves and reinvent themselves.
I have a goofy, stupid little story analogy that parallels that I've done in other interviews where I've likened car building to chefs.
Sure.
What I've always said was, you need that weird $250 plate of French food that looks like there's almost nothing on it.
Right.
Pushing the culinary boundaries. You need that not only to move it forward, but to also prove how amazing, never-ending, nonstop go-to chicken noodle soup is. I defy any top 5-star chef to come up with something that's going to stay the eons that chicken noodle soup has stayed.
Sure.
Right? So my kind of approach most of the time is instead of building cars, if I had a little restaurant, I want to do chicken noodle soup with some interesting different flavors, like add the chili pepper or some little thing that, that's got a little spark to it. It's still anchored in that chicken noodle soup, but it's a new fun version of it.
Yeah.
That's some more wild than others. So but I respect the fact that the food world has to have that crazy new stuff to move it forward.
Right.
So it's kind of how I look at that
no, absolutely.
Too.
And I agree with that 100%, and I think the biggest thing about American design is, like, as Americans, we have a tendency to always wonder what's going to be forward thinking and tomorrow, but like we love our iPhones, but we also like 501s. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
Yeah, and so there has to be
That's
that
a good
balance.
statement. We
There has
also
to
like
be-
Levi 501s. That's very true.
I think that's where they went wrong with, and if we're talking about the Cybertruck, it's just a tendency to be too much for all the wrong things.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
It's a brutal effort to kind of take a hammer to things as opposed to.
You're going to get that attention, but
Yeah.
for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I
that's
mean?
you know what,
Yeah.
when we were discussing that on the Cybertruck,
Yeah.
that was where the point I was trying to make is I get it,
Yeah.
but if it's punching me in the face, it's still punching me in the face.
Right.
It's still not for the right reason. But again,
Right.
Musk
I
is the guy
understand.
with 100
But if I
billions.
guess,
So.
but if he was so confident in it, how would he be coming out if that was his first vehicle? See,
Oh,
he
he'd
made
be-
the Model
he'd be
S.
done, yes.
He made the Model S, which was kind of a derivative of something that looks very Buickish, which
Yeah.
is Franz von Holhausen, comes from GM. It looks very comfortable. It's a very safe car.
Yeah.
So he laid all the safe groundwork. Well, if you feel so confident in it and you're so cocky and arrogant about it, why don't you make the Cybertruck your first vehicle, then see how people take it? But he can
don't
do
know.
that right now because he's already built the tribe and the network of people
Correct.
with Tesla.
Yeah, well said.
So
Yes.
And he's
so
smart.
I agree with you in what you said of he is mocking people. He's mocking automotive industry. He's mocking design. He's mocking pop culture because he's saying, ha ha ha, I'm so brilliant. I can do this because I laid the foundation with 3 reliable cars, which he has. I mean, they're great. I mean, I'm thinking about getting a Tesla myself for certain reasons. But when it comes to that, I feel like it's like, well, if you think that's so great and you think it's so easy to produce, then why didn't you come out with your first vehicle?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's
Right.
an interesting thing. And there's certain things I really respect about it, and there's certain things I think it makes a statement. I was looking at it downstairs. I will say it's not as unrefined as I thought.
Yeah.
But I have a tendency to think it's not functional. I mean, I think a windscreen that flat, I think corners that sharp. I mean, what's going to happen when a kid trips and dings his head on a corner that
Yeah,
sharp, you know?
right.
But there are certain things where, I will be honest with you, if it were refined, it would probably look like a GMC concept car.
Yeah, it might look
and
like
we've
a
already
Hummer.
seen that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it
Might
is
look like a
something that we
Hummer.
haven't seen, and for that I applaud him. And
Yeah.
the guy's super brilliant, and there's just certain things. And here's my thing, stepping away from the Cybertruck. I think aesthetic and design in general, all across the world, and everything, how we dress, everything is just, there's this thing, and I think it's derivative of social media, where taste and trying to find new beauty takes a back seat into just shock.
Yes.
Sure.
Like
Slap
we're
us in
going
the
to create
face.
the crazy shocking video. We're not going to do the beautiful photo shoot. We're going to do the
Right.
everything
Yeah,
has to
absolutely
be
right.
so shocking right now.
That's what I
from
said
the,
about the cover of the magazines with the
from the
kittens'
way we
heads.
dress
It's like,
and the way
I can
people
give you-
act
I can
and-
give you shock impact,
You're absolutely
but it
right.
doesn't mean it's going to be tasteful.
But to go back to being truly different and very tasteful, which is actually, that car's got a circle door on it.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
That's aesthetically
And look at how
crazy.
the windows go like
Right.
this.
And that is probably one of the most beautiful cars that anybody will ever view. I mean,
Yes.
we're all pretty lucky to be in that car's presence. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And it's like, that to me is very like, wow, it's got a circle door, and that's never,
It's shocking.
that's different
but
and
it's
shocking,
but it's still beautiful.
beautiful.
And that was the goal too.
And I'm
Yes.
sorry,
It
that's
wasn't shocking to be shocking.
Right.
It was shocking to be beautiful.
shocking to be beautiful. And you can still be different, and you can still be beautiful.
Yes.
This
Absolutely.
car,
It takes
I mean,
more
all
work.
these cars in here.
It takes more work.
Takes a lot of work, which
Right.
is another thing. I don't want to get on my high horse, but it's just people, I think, with social media, I think numbers take a front seat to embracing a trade and being an artist and being a really
Amen.
aesthetically
Yep.
good craft
Right.
person, you know?
As we've seen
Right.
in our industry alone,
Mm-hmm.
skipping the whole rest of the world, in our industry alone, since
Mm-hmm.
TV came in, and then obviously all the different social media comes in,
Mm-hmm.
you know as well as I do that I don't even have a name in my head, but there are people who have literally hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, and I honestly wouldn't hire them to sweep the floors in my shop. They don't know what they're doing.
Right.
They certainly have but they did that crazy funny, or they do all
Yes.
those videos that do that.
Right.
And our industry, unfortunately, at the end of the day, all the major companies and the smaller companies need to make money, right?
Right.
They need to stay open.
Yep.
So now at SEMA, now at events, who is the guest now? The goofy YouTuber,
Yes.
instead of the guy who knows exactly what he's
Right.
doing, who's created beauty. That's the shame of it all,
Right.
in my opinion.
But it is, and it's a huge problem. I mean,
we have some
it's you know,
dopey kid
yes.
is going to be there with lines and lines of fans, but yet somebody who
Yes.
consistently knocks it out of the park and does
Right.
stuff that everybody reads and looks at. Who? And that's frustrating to me.
And I see that a lot in, I came from magazines, and I did that for
did?
20 years.
Did
Believe
you
it or
do
not,
that?
yeah, I did that for 20 years.
Type things?
And then I got involved in marketing, and it was interesting to see what's gone on lately, because I've had some folks. We talk about finding people who are going to draw eyeballs.
Of course.
But do you want
money,
but do you want everybody to look at whatever you're doing in terms of your product? You're doing an automotive product, so you're doing an automotive product. You want to put porn in there? Is that going to get you eyeballs? Is that the right kind of eyeballs? Is that the right kind of
Right.
audience? Are you going to put some of their somebody who does goofy rabbit tricks? Okay, there's more eyeballs in that than there are in some of these other things, but that's not the right audience.
Right.
That's the wrong group, and that's unfortunately where a lot of marketing has gone. They're doing this stuff where they see these crazy numbers of views, but it's the wrong audience. There are, of the people who see that, there's going to be 14 people who care about cars that are in that entire audience. So you wasted all that time talking to this huge audience,
Yes.
frustrating them all. You actually have kind of done a bad service for yourself in terms of who you are as a company, and you're not telling the people about your product, and they're not coming to buy. They're coming to see and then walk away. And unfortunately, that's the way it is with some of these cars that are built.
Sure.
They've overdone it. I look at the door. We'll have to show a picture of the Cadillac
Round
here.
door rolls.
But just to look at, we look at the stuff from the standpoint of the hinge mechanism that it takes to hang that door and how it executes. And then, of course, the window, because like I said, it
Yeah, they both
goes
go
up
like
like
that,
that.
which is so cool.
Yeah, they both
which is
bend down.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Granted, they didn't get into the performance aspect. We've talked about that. The thing weighs so much, and it's got the tiny
Nobody
motor.
cares.
Nobody cares. It doesn't care. It doesn't have to move ever again.
As they say, just look at it.
Yes, just look at it.
You pull up
but
in
those-
that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But your GTO, absolutely beautiful. I've been a big Pontiac fan for years and years and years. I just have always enjoyed their vehicles. And what was the inspiration when you talk about your 67, the interior? I want to drill down a little bit. What made that kind of come together? What were the cues in that interior that you like? We'll show pictures of it here in the podcast. What were the cues that made it that you really wanted? You said this has to be here, and this is originality. This has to stay, and this can go a different level and go to a different point. What was kind of the thought? I'm just curious to drill down on that particular deal because it did so well. It won such a great award.
It did do very well. A lot of the inspiration came from originally what they did in 1967, just building it back through better materials and trying to incorporate what's kind of the trends today, which was like we did like a black tiger wood finish, which was almost mirrored to a piano black. We did a lot of nickel plating and machining in the car, which looks very robust and
Right.
gives it a very unique feel. A lot of it was just a matter of doing something a little bit better and more substantial than what they did. There was some themes that we tried to keep contemporary and make modern. I really wanted a nice low horizontal center console that went front to back. Now that's a very tricky thing because in our industry that's been done to death a lot.
Sure.
We've seen the whole wooden center console that goes up
Right.
into the package tray. I wanted to refine it in a way that looked very elegant. I mean, you see a lot of cars nowadays that have those very kind of low and linear center consoles in them, but we also took the armrest and made them float on top of the center console. We were going to place them on top, and we were at the interior shop one day messing with it. We kind of stacked it on top. We thought, man, it would be really cool if we floated that on the center console, made it almost look like a Zeppelin or something. And so that was kind of a trick thing. When people went up to the car, they were like, "Oh my gosh, the center consoles are floating. That's really cool." The armrest. The armrests were also inspired by. There was 60s carry-on luggage that the Pan Am did back in the day that was made by Samsonite. My mom had this luggage kit, and they were kind of pill-shaped and pill-box luggage. And it kind of went aero sensitive with the theme. And they came bright red too.
Really?
Yeah, and so that was kind of the inspiration of the armrest. You never know where you're going to get inspiration from. So there was a lot of unique things that just, I was able to throw at the car that really made it unique. But at the end of the day, we didn't want to deviate from what a 67 GTO was. And so we just wanted it to be really, really extremely tasteful.
Well, I think you did a great job.
And it looked very... we didn't want to lose any of that Chuck Jordan, who was the design director of GM back then, So,
I had lunch with him, believe it or not,
really?
At the Tech Center, one time through, Dean Batchelor. Yeah. Dean Batchelor, he was at Road and Track for years and years. They have Dean Batchelor. Dean hooked us up, and we went and had lunch in the executive lunchroom with Chuck Jordan, and that was really special.
Yeah.
Really, really a nice deal.
Yeah.
Looking out on the lake and Texas. It was very nice.
I used to work with his son, Mark, at Mazda.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
And Mark Jordan did the first generation Miata. Which
really?
He liked. But
Were the Halls involved in that too? Who were the Halls? There was like a Jim Hall or Joe Hall. There was somebody involved in that too. But go ahead. I mean, so he was involved in the design of that particular vehicle?
First generation, which was way before my time. But
and
when I was professional,
the best one of the bunch, because currently I think the new ones suck. But anyway.
Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and the guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a small block Chevy head bolt, so the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
For a translation of what he said, call ARPbolts.com.
but the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you cannot.
There you go.
Nope.
Excellent.
And then just check them out at ARP-bolts.com. We'd like to thank our friends at InTheGarageMedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance, they have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance with Nick, my buddy Nick,
you're
the
so
editor.
biased.
So
Correct.
yes, of course.
Yes.
But they're doing print media, which is of course our favorite. So
In color and
magazine.
everything.
in color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is
Right.
a fun
that's a
deal.
lot.
Great tech.
Great
Written
tech.
by you and
not
others
always
that are
written by me, but yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Not always written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them
read
out
it.
at InTheGarageMedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking of the interior, one of my favorite little things on the car was they're not grills, but the rear speaker coves in the package tray, those
Oh,
polished,
yes.
those-
Yeah. We kinda
I
hogged that out.
loved
Yeah.
that you did something that everybody has been tuck the speaker underneath, punch the leather in the
Right.
holes,
Correct.
let it tie away, let it go away, clean up that back area. And so for me, on first blush, when I walked up to it, I saw chrome or polished or nickel
Yeah.
in the back, and I went, there's a gutsy move.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what it was yet. I was still 25 feet out, and I went, there's something popping up, shiny,
And there it
in
is.
the package tray, which is not the norm, as you know.
Yeah.
And then I the design, the layout, and the little scallop in it, or however you want to call that, I was like, it was so refreshing to see something that is usually completely gone,
Yes.
and it's brought in, and again, my favorite is on that car, it was brought in so tasteful that it wasn't like, what's these chrome things sitting in the back window, in the back package tray,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
I brought people over to actually look at those,
Oh, nice.
besides the whole car, but
Sure, yeah.
I'm like, look at those rear speaker things, they're so cool, because it was interesting to look at, but it still followed the car.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some weird shape for no good reason. Those I really, really liked. I thought that was just a master stroke.
Yeah, that was a
in
really
an area that nobody does anything.
And that was a really fun detail. Those late 60s GM cars, they had huge back windows and they had huge package trays. but oftentimes, they kind of took a backseat to the rest of the car.
No pun intended.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
But we were looking at it as an area to really embrace some really nice design right there, and so we're glad that you appreciate that because.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they don't do anything in that area, or they maybe just put a little trim or something like that. And so that was an area I really wanted to embrace. Absolutely.
See, it's horrific for me, though, because now I want to, and I refuse to copy somebody. So
You have
I
to think of
can't.
something all on your own. That's
God
it.
dang it.
That's right.
Way to go.
Speaking of design, what's on your arm there? What are we looking at?
Looks like a crossfire almost.
No, that's actually a design of my 8th term Art Center car. That's the final sketch that I did.
Eighth term. Okay.
Before I did the final model. 8th term, so in Art Center, you have 8 terms, 3 terms a year. And then your 8th term is your graduating term. So that's kind of the term that dictates where you're going to go get a job and work for after you graduate. So actually, I did a Chrysler Imperial that was inspired by streamliners. Actually, you can see the teardrop shaped kind of circular door.
Nice.
So I always loved this era of car, the streamline deco era of cars. So the concept was to do a Chrysler Imperial. At the time, Daimler was still a part of the Chrysler division. So if we had the Maybach chassis and we did a Imperial that was on the Maybach chassis, that was actually it would be this. That would be an Imperial, in my opinion. That level of luxury, and brought Chrysler into the area of Maybach and Rolls-Royce, or maybe slightly in between it. Chrysler did a lot of really cool things back in the day. I mean, they still do, but like right now, you're looking at the Ghia cigar cars. That's a Cadillac, of course, but the Ghia had a big influence on what Chrysler was doing back in the early 50s, late 40s, and a lot of those concept cars. So I was always inspired by that, and so that was my inspiration of that car. And
was that Virgil Elsner? Or
Exactly.
Exner? How, was
Virgil
it
Exner, yeah.
Exner, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, his cars were crazy. I remember seeing a bunch of custom cars.
Right.
Did you know Mike Fennell? Did you know Mike Fennell?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike had storage on a whole bunch of those, and I remember taking photos of a bunch of those cars that were just incredible. Pininfarina and Ghia and just all these crazy Chrysler concept cars that never went anywhere, but just were stunning. I mean, really, really.
It's weird. Somebody just asked me this the other day, and I hate it when I get asked because I always forget, but Ghia did a Cadillac. Or no, maybe it was Pininfarina. I got to think. But it was Pininfarina, right? The Jacqueline? No. They actually, I think it was Pininfarina, but they did a Cadillac that was like in 1960, but it ended up being kind of the precursor to the '62 Bubble Top, which is also one of my favorite cars.
Yeah,
Chevrolet,
yeah.
But like the cylinder pillars, a lot of glass, the bubble top,
right.
and it was called the Jacqueline, which was inspired by the Kennedy, dynasty. But that's one of my favorite cars.
Nice.
Just that whole era of car with the Italian take on American cars is really cool.
Did you go upstairs to the?
I did. Yeah, that's
crazy?
amazing.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. The stuff that there's a guy by the name of Strother McMinn, who actually was my father's instructor at Art Center in the 50s, and the guy was there till the 80s or 90s, wasn't
No,
he?
he was right there until my first. I started Art Center in '99.
Okay.
And he was there. He
Still
passed
there?
away my first term, which was unfortunate. But we did get to, have a little bit of contact with him, and when I was going there. But his influence is still really sought after.
Amazing.
Because he really industrialized the way automotive design is taught in a college setting, which there's only. I mean, now there's more schools, but at the time there was only 3 schools to go to car design, which was CCS, Royal College of Art, and Art Center. And I think there's a few smaller ones.
What's the one in GMI? GMI probably had some of that too.
Right.
In Detroit. Yeah. So did you see the Batmobiles up there? Those crazy. My father loved those cars. This is an Alfa Romeo, so I digress.
That's okay.
Anyway, but that whole display meant a lot to me because of my father's involvement
absolutely.
there.
That's amazing.
That's showing here on the 3rd floor of the Petersen, and well worth the price of admission.
It is,
So,
yeah.
A
lot of
care
people
about car design.
If you care about cars and car design, a lot of people don't know who Strother McMinn really is, but I mean, without him, automotive design as we know it right now today would not exist. Really.
I agree.
I mean, I think there's a quote up there that Chuck Jordan said. you know, if you like cars today, just chances are McMinn had a hand on it no matter what.
Yeah,
And-
fair statement.
Yeah.
That's big number. That's a big statement.
It's a huge statement. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
everybody that is anybody that's a design director now or has had an influence with Strother McMinn, you
Yeah.
know, from Chris Bangle to Jay Mays, anybody, you
Yeah.
know, and it's just really cool. Special. It's nice that they embraced that and that they did that.
Yes.
You know, yeah.
It's been there a while, and I hope they keep it there for a while.
Sure. Yeah.
So everybody can go see it. Look at that. But yeah, no, amazing stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Our paths have crossed in other ways that we won't mention.
Yeah. So.
We'll go on from there.
So where did it start? Obviously, before going to art school,
Sure. Yeah.
was it the love of? I'm assuming you dug the car first before you learned to draw the car.
No.
You were drawing other things besides cars, and then said, "I want to draw cars."
I think my mom said I was drawing like early 4 years old, and it was cars and trucks. So that's when I started, when I was 4. That's when,
So it kind of ran parallel.
yeah, I mean, my
Interest in
dad
art
was a
and
mechanic.
interest in cars.
My dad was a mechanic, and he was a car guy. He still is a car guy. And my mom was a creative in her own right. So I always say, you know, I combined the two to become a car designer. But
Sure.
I was always around cars. My grandfather had a shop that my dad ended up buying from him. We just recently sold, but it's been around since 1948.
Where was that?
In San Bernardino,
Oh, okay.
right off of Waterman, Route 66. It's been there
Huh.
since 1940. It's called A&B Automotive. And so I was always around shops and cars, and my grandfather was in the cars on my mom's side. But yeah, when I started drawing, I was drawing cars. You know, of course, I like die-cast and Hot Wheels and Matchbox, back when Matchboxes came in boxes. And then I just really never stopped. You know, I always developed it, and you know, I got into a little bit of sports and stuff like that, and skateboarding, and as a kid, and you know, different things. But when it came time to, you know, when I got to be 14, I think 13, I remember seeing the Randy Lawrenson Hot Rod cover of Cadzilla at my uncle's house. He had a subscription to Hot Rod, and it had to fold out and all that stuff. And
Sure.
and then I remember seeing it on, was it Coors? Was it Coors? Who were they?
Yes.
Or was it was it cigarette company or
No,
alcohol company?
Coors, they did a thing
Coors
with
Light Tour?
ZZ Top, yeah.
Right. I remember seeing a commercial with that, with the Bowder bikes and the whole thing, and like,
Cadzilla and Hogzillas.
yeah. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? You know what I mean? And that still probably is my favorite car. Yeah.
As I've said before on this program,
Yeah.
it is as far as a hot rod, a built
Sure.
car, not an original car from a manufacturer.
Yeah.
It is my favorite car on the planet, and I remind Larry Erickson of that every time I see him.
Absolutely.
And I'm fortunate enough to be friends with Billy, and I've told him that it's my favorite car. I absolutely, every time I look at that car, I'm like,
Yeah.
yep, still my favorite car.
Yeah. Yeah. And it started with that car.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's funny because your first term in Art Center, which is like really boot campish type environment, there's this class called Development of Form, and what you have to do is the first day, most kids don't know what the structure of the class is. I knew because I already had upperclassmen that told me, but you have to go out and buy a toy and bring it in. So some people just they buy whatever. I knew that you had to draw this toy from every angle, take it apart, put it back together, and every week you had to do 40, 50, 60 pages of sketches of that toy.
Oof.
From the door handle to the inside to the underneath, upside down, the wheel, take it apart, draw all the components, everything. So I knew that it had to be something that you better like, right? And because a lot of people are like, I bought a little Tykes toy.
Yeah,
or I bought
lucky you
My
got
Little
it."
Pony. Like,
Oh,
you're
God.
drawing a lot of My Little Pony.
Yeah.
And so I actually had the Franklin Mint of Cadzilla.
Wow.
So I brought it in, and it was just, the instructor was like, that's a lot of drawing this car. And but I loved every minute of it. And so, I mean, literally, and the way the instructor was, Gaylord Eccles, he had 40 pages of sketches, and if you didn't do the 40, he counted them, then you got to do 20 more. So you had to do 60 the next week.
Oh boy.
And then if you didn't do that, then it was 80. And he would drop you down a letter grade, and if you got into D territory, there was kids that were literally they were gone. I mean, by the first term at Art Center, they couldn't make it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's when you start building up a mileage to the. It's funny though. I looked at that. At the end, you have to do a huge poster. I'm looking at that rendering across the way there.
Steering wheel?
Well, no, the rendering of the blue purple car. And
Yeah.
I actually did a rendering of Cadzilla about that size on that color paper.
You still have that?
Yeah, it's at my parents' house. Yeah, and it's
Sell
crazy.
Some copies of that?
Yeah, yeah. And I actually did a camera roll. It was coming out with and I drew negatives on the all the view of the Cadzilla. And it was coming out of like a movie camera because it was entertainment star car type deal. But yeah, Cadzilla was kind of where it started with me trying to be, and then this of course being on Home Improvement. The infamous scene where he races Bob Vila, doesn't he?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of where I was really attracted to the whole high-end hot rod thing, the $1 million hot rod thing. From that. And then I found out about Art Center. Actually, there was a period where I really got into shoe design, and I was drawing Nikes. And my art teacher took all the drawings and acted like he was mad at me, but he actually sent them to Nike. And
wow, that's cool.
And I come in one day and he goes, "You remember those drawings?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not drawing anymore." He's like, "No, it's not that." He's like, "I actually sent them to Nike." And I'm like, "Oh, you did?" And he goes, "Yeah," and they actually wrote you back. He's like, "Actually, Phil Knight, who's the owner of Nike, wrote you back in a handwritten letter." So he gave me all the drawings back and Post-it notes on critiquing. And then, he said, "Hey, you have a lot of talent. You need to check out this school called Art Center." And so that's when I went there, and I found out they have.
What a great story!
I found out they have
cool.
I found out they have an automotive design program, and I was like, I want to do that. Like I saw these clay models and drawings like this, and I was just like, I'm good on shoes.
Isn't it hard to get in? I mean, what's the qualifying deal to get into the school?
I don't know how now, but back then it was extremely hard to get in.
Yeah.
One of the things about Art Center back in the day is a lot of people that came to Art Center were usually the average age was 27 to early 30s. They were usually doing something else.
Right.
Yeah, because the school was so rigorous that they usually wanted you to get a degree in something else before you went there.
I heard that too.
And so the maturity level, they really wanted to keep up. And a lot of the kids that were younger couldn't keep up. I mean, you're really averaging 2-3 hours of sleep a night for 3 months at a time, and which is why, like, when it comes to show car builds and SEMA stuff, I'm like, it's like this is cake. Because I mean, there was times when like I was up for like a week and a half and I didn't get any sleep. When I graduated, I think I slept for like 2 days straight.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was so tired, I was painting my clay model, and the needle from the paint gun came out and got stuck in between the quick of my nail, and then I spilled paint thinner on accident, and then I passed out. And I mean, there's just horrible stories. I had one friend that got so tired he cut his thumb off in the bandsaw. Like,
I know this feeling.
Yeah,
Yikes.
it's a really boot camp environment. It's very hard to get in. It's very hard to sustain. It's very hard to see it all the way through. And then basically too, once you get in, you think you're okay. I'm in. I'm going to become a car designer. But you have to get internships to get a car design job.
Yep.
And if you don't get internships, you're not getting placed. So there's the whole fight of appealing for or applying for internships. Luckily, I went to Hyundai and Mazda, which were really great internships. And then when I graduated, I went to Honda, and I started in their power sports division.
Oh, okay.
Working on sport bikes.
Sure.
And
that had to be cool.
it was cool. I really wanted to go to the automotive side, but at the time they just didn't have an opening. I interviewed over there with Doug Halbert, but they came to school and interviewed with me, but they didn't have it. But I went to the bike side. I'm not a motorcycle guy. I love motorcycles. I love looking at them. I don't like riding them. So after a while, they were like, you need to learn how to ride motorcycles. And I was like, I'm probably out of here. So I quit. It was funny. I met Mike and Jim Ring at the end of Honda, and they were keeping me so busy doing drawings at night. My parents were like, why don't you just quit and go
work there?
Yeah, well, not work there, but freelance for them full time, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
that's what I kind of did.
Yep.
And so that kind of led me down the path of doing what I'm doing now.
That's great.
And there was times where I actually stepped back into the job market and was design director at different companies and stuff like that. But it's always led me back to striking out on my own.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, obviously it's been extremely successful.
Oh, well, I don't know. Extremely successful, but it's a living, so
That's good.
It's fun,
That's
right?
good.
Yeah.
I'll throw in personally, my father was a nut for details. He
Yeah.
As a kid, he did, you know, how they do the sailors used to do scrimshaw on a whale tooth.
Yeah.
He would do that with an X-Acto knife.
Oh, really?
He would do the full rigging and the whole bit. He ended up getting a full ride to Art Center 53.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't around, so I couldn't tell you about that.
That was probably when they were in downtown.
They were.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they were
Third Street,
downtown.
yeah.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly where they were. Yeah, he talked about that being just a complete life-changing experience. All of it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so funny because I've met people that went to Art Center in that era, and they all say this. They all have the same story. Like, I didn't know about car design, but then I stumbled into Art Center, and I went to go there for fine art or sculpture, but then they found out about automotive design. Because automotive design is a very secretive thing. Like, we're trained not to know or talk about what we do. Even yesterday, I had lunch and with my two friends, and they're talking about, I'm working on this and I'm doing that, and they're in different design spaces, in apparel design, and me, I'm just like, I can't talk about what I'm doing. You know, I just can't. And even though if it's on a hot rod level, I can't. I'm fortunate enough to work with some pretty good celebrity clients, and I can't talk about that. You know what I mean? So, it's we're trained to like kind of be spies almost.
Well,
but,
sure.
You know, because there's so much money that goes into R&D and development of the car on the OEM level. There's a lot of money that's going into the stuff that we do right now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then oftentimes it's very competitive because the owners are going for an award, they're going for a debut, and they don't want.
You know,
It's
and
very competitive against other builders.
I
Yeah.
struggle with, because as you know now, it's we touched base on the whole social media thing.
Sure.
So, and I've pride myself on my involvement with. I've had companies that have sponsored me since the late '90s. So I always want to promote them. I always want to make them happy,
Sure.
right, and put it out there. And I have opportunities to have magazines or online follow along with builds, and I choose my words careful. I shy away from it. I love the promo, and everyone knows I'm a big mouth, right? Well, I am.
That's why you're here.
I'm a very outwit person, but I like holding everything up to the chest, and then I want to roll into a show and go, dig it,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Unveil it. And like showing everything all the way along is like, well, that's anticlimactic. You already showed the 80
Right.
cool things on the car, and okay, now it's painted and got leather on it. Okay, yeah, it is different than in bare metal, but
Yeah.
I wanted to, whoever you are, I wanted to surprise you when you walked up to the car, not, oh yeah, I saw this, so that's what it looks like
Yeah,
painted now, you know?
But you're a master of that. You know,
But
you're a master
I
of that.
struggle with it because I turn down constantly
Yeah.
the opportunities to do that either monthly in a magazine or online, and then you start getting that, get, for lack of a better term, the guilt trip. It's like, well, the people involved donating the parts and all this stuff, here's an opportunity for me to show them multiple times, not just once the car's done.
Right.
So you want to make a fair decision to promote them
Right.
too, but it's just like, I don't want to give the car away. And
I understand.
No,
it's a hard thing.
There aren't any magazines anyway,
Because I
so
know
what the
you're,
hell?
you do tuck stuff away, right? You got to keep it quiet.
We have a mutual friend, Sean Davis.
Yes, of course.
And we have actually a lot of mutual friends that are very, very big and have robust careers in the social media world, and they have this. And it's not a bad way of doing things. And Sean, I think lately is also kind of saw things through the lens of how I think, but like
He was on one of our recent
right,
episodes.
Yeah, we brought him on.
absolutely. But a lot of these guys are like they want to share everything, and we
Yes.
have to show everything. We want to bring the car out in bare metal, and we want to show it when it's painted, and we want to show it in the booth, and we want to show, and it is great, but it takes the luster and it knocks the polish off of the final. And I just don't want to show. I'm very competitive. I'm extremely competitive, and I don't want to show my competitors. Even though there's a friendly competition there, don't get it messed up. I'm still trying to do way better than you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
you bet.
still trying to take it to a whole nother level. Like, we're friends.
Yeah.
But when we go into Building 4 at the Roadster Show,
Right.
we're not that good of friends anymore. No,
Well, I'm
kidding.
still friends with
No,
you.
I know. I'm kidding.
I know. But
No,
I know your feeling.
But it's
though.
that healthy.
I share that
But
thing.
it's that
like
healthy. It's
competition.
that healthy competitiveness that drives this industry. That
That's
gives
right.
you cars like this.
Yes.
Before this car came around, it was wire wheels and jag rear ends.
Correct.
And then
right.
now this comes around and people are like, oh my God, now
Yeah.
you know, and then. And then I think Tony Nancy won after the Roadster show with the,
Right.
that had that kind of style. But
Sure.
Yeah, but what was that? The McLaren? What was it? The McPherson Flyer.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe McPherson.
Right, Joe
The
McPherson's
Infinity,
car,
the
yes.
yellow one, with
Right.
the Infinity
Yeah,
motor.
yeah,
Yep.
so-
It was actually a very nice car, though.
Actually, in some respects, was just as beautiful as this, you know,
Right,
but
in
done
its own way.
heritage. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But the point is I'm very competitive on a friendly level, of course. But like, I don't like to show what I'm working on, and it even hinders me because I could have a lot more Instagram followers.
Right, same. That's what I'm saying.
But
It's-
I don't.
I don't want to. I don't want to
don't
give it
wanna
away
do it,
either. I
yeah.
want to roll in and pull the cover off and go ta-da!
Yeah.
Instead of they've already basically seen the whole thing, but without color.
I prefer to do that, like as a magazine writer or magazine editor. I used to like to see, okay, here's the big splash, but if you want to show me some behind the scenes stuff,
Yes.
wonderful.
Yeah.
But don't
Yeah, I'll
put it
do a
out there
little of
first.
that.
Don't put it out there first.
Yeah.
Put it out there on the backside. But we need to wrap up.
We do.
We do. He's doing the circle the airplanes kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, he is. Part two.
Well, yeah. Can we drag you on for another one?
Sure.
So people watching right now can watch the next one.
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I think there's more to talk about.
Absolutely there
'cause,
is.
You know, and that's the. I don't know what that meant, but.
Thank our sponsor.
Oh yes, that ARYMC. Anyway,
Car Guy Confessions with Jeff
Smith,
without
who's
Jeff Smith.
not here.
Right.
But we do have our boys at ARP-bolts.com, which discerning car designers and builders definitely request on our builds.
That's
And of course, we want to thank the Petersen Museum for the bazillion-dollar backdrop
Absolutely.
we have going on here.
bet.
Yeah.
So,
You bet.
and stay tuned. Actually, we're going to keep him here, so there'll be another one to watch and talk more to Sean Smith. And thanks for coming on for part one. And thanks for already giving up the rest of your evening for part two.
no problem.
We'll be back in just a blink. Thanks.